Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome back to Drumlin Diner. So, I wasn't entirely sure what to do with this little space here. My first thought was a Minuteman office of some kind. But I've done a few of those lately, and I'm not entirely sure how friendly they are, really. So, I was thinking I might not do that for this particular save, since we're starting over again. So, in the meantime, I thought, well, there's people living here, and they need to eat, so a kitchen garden would do quite well. So we'll go something different from farm, plus it's a little small for that. So first thing we're going to do here is fence the space off. We're using a couple of Aslam's junk walls here. These things are actually a little bit curved, so they can be a little awkward to work with for something like this, but they're quite cool, and they do sink into the ground quite well, so they provide a nice low fence as well. I didn't really want an overly large barricade, something to stop the wandering Brahmin coming through. Although to be fair, Brahmin being Brahmin, they will probably do whatever they want anyway. However, it marks the area off quite nicely. One thing to bear in mind, these supports, the angled struts on the back there, they stick out quite a long way, and especially when you sink it down like this, quite a long way under the ground as well, so it can make placing things inside the area a little bit more difficult. So onto the opening, sort of facing towards the front of the settlement, towards where the diner entrance is and where most of the population will be spending their time. So we've got the opening there on the right, and I have a little bit of difficulty getting these to sit right, partly because of the curve there, partly because those crows keep getting in the way. So with a little bit of judicious practice, we'll get it into place eventually. It creates quite a nice low fence. Did think about using some of the either the picket fences or something like that, the wire fences maybe, but they're a little too standard, so I wanted to do something a little different, which is why I picked these. And I very rarely find an opportunity to actually use these particular pieces, because there's deterrence to attack. They're a little low, even at full height, so as cool as they look, I've never felt they quite fit in a wall, for the most part. I have used them a little bit on this one. The little gap on the right here needs closing up, so I'm going to go with a railing and a half wall, just to mix those textures up a little bit. It's not really a case of anybody getting through. There we go, you can see the legs sticking out, getting in the way there. And I eventually managed to select the right thing. Third time's the charm, there we go. Yeah, there's not really anybody going to be coming through here, but it's just for a sake of completion, really, as much as anything. It's a little bit fiddly to get these into place. For some reason the cinder blocks here, again I can't scrap them without, as I said before, more aggressive scrapping mods. They're a little resistant to having anything placed too close to them, which is a bit unfortunate, but we manage. Of course the feet on the wall here stick out quite a long way, which makes putting this one in a little bit more complicated. But it goes in at a bit of an angle at the end, which I kind of like. And we've sunk most of it into the ground just to use the top section there. So it doesn't really need to be too tall. There we go. Nice and scrappy. Simple. So let's see what we're working with now. And we'll move on to some planters. So these garden plots, the big problem with them, to my mind anyway, is that you see how thin they are. There's no depth to them whatsoever. So most of the food options we have, possible exception of the gourds maybe, just wouldn't survive in that little earth really. So in order to make them a little bit more interesting and a little bit more believable, we're going to put some boards around the edge, in this case the stone textured ones. These are USO added. And we'll just group select them into place and make the thing look like it's much deeper than it really is, and make it look a little bit more interesting as well. It's a dead simple bit of group select. Just try and line everything up. Unfortunately, because the corners stick out a little bit there, it's not perfect, but it is what it is. This is a Fallout building after all. And for some weird reason that I can't quite fathom, those garden plots seem to be a slightly strange size. They're a little bit smaller than the standard sort of floor pieces that these railings are actually designed to snap onto, so we've got a bit of overlap going on here. But fortunately, the textures on these work pretty well with it. Some of the ones I use later, not quite as much, but I didn't want to use the same thing over and over. But overall, I'm quite happy with the effect. Not perhaps completely original, but it works. Put my own spin on it a little bit. However, it's a lot of repetition here, so we'll drop this one into place and we'll skip on ahead, because I'm sure you've got the general idea by now. And we're doing it away from the final resting place for it. It's probably a really poor choice of words upon reflection, but anyway. Simply because group selecting in such confined space is a total pain, so we'll play around it a bit, try and get it into a place I actually want it to sit. Fortunately, getting the angle to view this from is quite awkward, especially on console. I believe on PC you can work around with that a little bit, but it is what it is. It looks okay. So I've done a couple more. We use different boards on these ones, but same principle. We can do them at different heights, partly because of the lay of the land, and again for a little bit of variety. I think I'm trying to bear in mind with positioning this, even here, is that I want to be able to sort of walk between the various plots, so you can get around to sort of tend to the crops, which, as you can see, we can. So that's that one. I'll just take a quick measure to see where the rest of these will fit. We've got plenty of room there. Okay. So with this one, it doesn't quite work with the original idea, because you can see under it, but it's a little different again. I've just used some of the steps from the cinder block tab on the junk wall section of USO. Now it just provides a little bit of extra support and raises it up. It's a slightly different texture. You could, if you wanted to just use ordinary cinder blocks and strictly make it look more sealed all the way around, you'd probably have to just use single ones and build it entirely from scratch, which would take forever, which is why I chose those. Although in hindsight might not be the best idea ever. And there's an additional one gone in as well, but again it's more repetition, so we need some form of irrigation and some drinking water for our residents. So I'm quite a fan of these windmill water pumps. They're based on the windmills in Dry Rock Gulch in Nuka World. But they're a somewhat more practical, relatively speaking, easy to assemble concept for pumping water out of the ground. The hand pumps I suppose would work, but they'd require some slightly more advanced tools to put them together, I would have thought, whereas a saw and hammer and nails should do the job for this thing, apart from the concrete anyway. I did want to try and hide those cinder blocks a bit with it, but unsurprisingly, unless a rug glitched it, which actually I probably could have done with this, thinking about it, it wasn't going to play ball. So we're going to slot it in next to it just there. I had thought about sinking it down a bit so you just see the wooden legs and not the concrete, but I didn't think it would hide it very effectively without putting the sails, I suppose is the word, on the windmill so low down that the path of the wind would be blocked by the buildings. So push it up a little bit and we'll drop a little bit of decoration next to it. Makes sense to me that the water will be stored in blue barrels. Unfortunately, that one is a little bit too low, so we'll adjust, and there we go. So, some plants in place, and have a look at the almost finished product here. We've got a little bit of space here at the back, and obviously no garden or farm or anything of the sort would be complete without some form of shed, as these half walls will fit in, so wall and roof things. I'm going to use a sealed one using the corrugated metal there rather than the wood. Again, because there's a lot of wood being used in this already. And we'll just group select it into the back there. It's a nice sort of open-fronted lean-to to store things in. So get the angle sorted there. I'm just going to sink the floor slightly under the ground, just so we've got the bare earth showing as the floor there. And there we go. So we'll stick a little bit of decoration in there. A few storage boxes, just added by USO. And you'll see in a second I've used an updated version of a mod I've had floating around for a while. Tim Timmons Swapper mod I've had for ages for when I absolutely have to use either place anywhere of some description, that's the word I'm looking for. But a separate mod that was, again by Tim Timmon, was Make Static, which has been combined into his new Quapper, I suppose, mod, which, okay, it does the place anywhere and it does Make Static as well, all in one mod. So when I updated my mod list a little recently, I've downloaded that instead, so it's slightly less cluttered. So we're just going to drop the objects in there, try and find the shovel I dropped somewhere and can't spot. You wouldn't believe how long I ran around looking for this. It blends in far too well. There we go. And we'll drop this in as well. I tend to use this Make Static option as an alternative to OC Decorator these days. Because OC Decorator can be a little limited sometimes, and it's hard to place items, particularly on console. I'm not sure what it's like on PC, but it can be a bit challenging. Unfortunately, for some reason, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of collision when the spade's the other way up. So it'll have to go in that way. That was a case of just point your crosshair at it, press square to select it, go into the miscellaneous tab, and just activate the Make Static option. Which you can't really see me pressing square, unfortunately, but there we go. There we go. They are now static objects. Dead easy. No knocking them off, having them fall around. Actually, it did fall around ever so slightly, but I just didn't spot that early enough on. So that's basically our little kitchen garden. So there's one more thing I wanted to tuck in here. It's relatively quick and easy and certainly doesn't warrant its own build. And the farm didn't take us very long there. And that's a little workshop, which is, it's not massively complicated, but it should look alright when it's done. Because this character is just past level 15 or so. I think she's level 16 I think now. So before too terribly long, I want to tackle Automatron, which means I'll need somewhere to put a Robot Workbench. And as I don't much like sticking these things out in the open, we're going to build a little workshop for it. So I can use the warehouse pieces here, get a bit of clearance, and just mix and match a bit with the pieces. We're going to put some greenhouse pieces in as well. Lets a little bit more light in there and just gives it a slightly different look. Makes it look ever so slightly less boxy. To be fair, it's still pretty boxy, but it's supposed to be a quick and easy form follows function sort of a structure. Stick the warehouse door on there. Not too happy with this, so we'll make a couple of little changes. I actually took out these half walls and half windows and replaced them with full greenhouse walls. Because I ended up making a couple of little changes. The building's a little too high up, the foundation's not low enough. At least not for my taste anyway. So I swapped those out when I did that. And I'm just going to use some ramps because I've been determined to get these in somewhere. Which actually these went in surprisingly conveniently without too much help. Which I wasn't really expecting, if I'm honest. You can snap them together with the rest of the scaffolding pieces, but you end up with a gap between them if you do that, which doesn't look as neat and tidy. So group select would have been the other alternative I'd used had I not been able to place these manually, but if something wants to cooperate for a change, I'm quite happy to allow it to. So there we go, nice and easy, just covers the width of the door there. A little awkward to line up using a controller, but we manage. And there we go, dead simple. So, on to a little tour. So I was previously drawing a little bit of a blank on where to go from here after this, but I've got a couple of ideas for things I want to add. A little home for Trudy and Patrick, and possibly somewhere for Wolfgang Simone as well, as I resolve the situation peacefully on arrival and they're hanging around as well. I might have to look into the lore there a little bit more. For now, a little bit of food being produced. Probably not realistically enough to feed that many people, but assume they get a bit more from their trade routes. Trashcan Carla for one stops by at this stage. Hopefully before too terribly long we'll be able to get the Bunker Hill caravan post and have other traders stop by as well. For now, there we go. No crops coming out just yet, but These things take time. So there you go, you can see I've adjusted the walls there so you've got a bit more window showing. I'll swap this one in the corner out for one with broken glass. We'll open the door there, take a look inside. So obviously, still haven't got the workbench yet, but most of the decoration's in place, and we just drop it in when we get the chance. I hope. Assuming it fits, it should do. A few posters from Posters of the Commonwealth there as well. And that's why I went for the broken glass. Because you don't really want a generator powered by petrol just pumping fumes out into an enclosed building. That's not going to end well. So there we go, got a light switch as well. I haven't actually decided what I'm planning on doing in terms of powering the settlement as a whole yet, so that may well change at some point in the future. A couple of nice simple little builds. Something to fill up a bit of the space, but I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, I'm sure you know what to do by now. So thank you very much for watching as always, and if you would like to support the channel more directly, there's a couple of options down in the description. For now, I will be speaking to you all very, very soon.